So have you ever taken a trip where you're on the interstate and you're driving, and then all of a sudden you find yourself completely lost in thought? You start solving the world's problems and you start working through your to-do list for the next week, and you start trying to have that conversation, that tough conversation that you have to have with your mother-in-law about the holidays that are coming up. And then before you know it, all of a sudden you're passing your exit and you wonder to yourself, how the heck did I get here? This week, we've been wondering that question. How did I get here? Looking at all those times in our lives when our lives didn't turn out exactly how we imagined. Or places where we have kind of drifted off course and we wonder, how did this happen? How did I get here? How did I get here? What do we do when we find ourselves in a place that we didn't intend? Father Richard Rohr is an American Franciscan monk, and he's a person that inspires me by his readings regularly. He runs the Center for Contemplation and Action in New Mexico, and he talks a great deal about how most sacred things in our world actually exist in paradox, hustle and surrender, Jesus as fully God and fully human, bread and wine, but also Jesus' body and blood. The church as called and sent at the same time. Human beings being able to hold both joy and sorrow at the same time. Contemplation and action. What we lose in our lives, we gain. Our weakness is seen as strength. Last in the Bible is first. Serving in Scripture is leading. Jesus takes this painful death to free us from death. All of these paradoxes as indicators of the sacred, things that invite us into this non-dualistic kind of theology, this little mystical moment when these paradoxes happen. You see, we live in this culture that fights against trying to hold two things that are contradictory at the same time. We live in this culture that likes to put things in binaries, like it's either this or this. It can't possibly be both. So what Richard Rohr suggests is that when it is both, then we're really getting in tune with what God is doing, when we're getting tuned in with the divine. I was sitting at the gym one day and I was getting ready to go to the treadmill, and I'm a chatty person, if this doesn't surprise you, but I'm a chatty person. So I was talking to the woman next to me and I noticed that she had an accent. So I said, "Oh, hey, where are you from?" And she told me that she was a refugee from the war in Bosnia. And so we were talking for quite a long time as we're sort of walking slowly on our treadmills before it's time for us to get our heart rate up. And then I started to complain, "Oh, I don't even know if I want to exercise today." And then she said something funny to me. She said, "Well, then don't." And I was like, well, I have to. And she said, "No, you don't." And I thought, I guess she's right. But then she said something funny to me that I'll never forget in her cool Bosnian accent. She said to me, "Angie, sometimes in your life you are fat and sometimes you're thin. You're both. That's just the way it is." I was like, she goes, "You're both fat and thin." What do we do when we find ourselves somewhere that we didn't intend? Well, I guess when we get to those points in our lives where we wonder, how the heck did we get here? It's paradox. We can do two things. Number one, we can do nothing. Or number two, we can do something. And it's really probably both. We do nothing and we do something. Sometimes we do nothing. Like when we're called to wait, we're called to just sit in it a little bit longer, not to take that great big jump right this second, but we're called to just sit and wait and surrender and let God show us what we're supposed to be doing. You see, this isn't like a complicit waiting. It's an active waiting. But sometimes we're called to go do something. Sometimes we've been waiting so long we haven't actually taken any action, but God calls us to move forward. We go and we make the change that is required to get our life back on center, to get our life re-anchored, and to do this in our lives. It's both doing and not doing. Ecclesiastes puts it beautifully in chapter 3. It says this, it says, "What do workers, you and I, gain from their toil? I've seen the burden that God has laid on the human race. He made everything beautiful in its time, but he also set eternity in the human heart, and no one can fathom what God is doing from the beginning to the end. So I know that there is nothing better than for people to be happy and do good while they live. Each of them, they can eat and drink and find satisfaction in their work because this is the gift of God. I know that everything that God does will endure forever, and nothing can be added or taken away from it. It's both doing and not doing. Friends, if you've been hustling, if you've been spreading yourself thin, take a break. Do nothing. Trust that God has got you and God will have you no matter if you hustle or not. God's working even harder on this situation than you are. And if you've been doing nothing and you're afraid you haven't made a change because you don't want to screw up, do something. Pick up your cross and follow him. Pick any direction and God will go with you no matter what you pick. So wherever you find yourselves today, when you ask yourself the question, how the heck did I get here? Pick one. Do something or do nothing because God's got you in both of them.